It's been 365 days of interesting events across the country, from a parliament that turned into a boxing ring to the appointment of an IGP who shocked the nation with the arrest of high-profile personalities. Now, in a few hours, the year 2021 will be over, but what are the highlights? These and more are packed in a 1.5-hour show of sounds, analysis, insights, and discussions right here on Joy 99.7 FM. Please be my guest as I bring you the 2021 year in review. Thank you very much for joining us on the 2021 year in review with me, Ernest Minu. Your views and comments are welcome via WhatsApp number 055 111 1997 055 111 997. Now let's start from January. The year started with the swearing in of Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo as president for a second term. Voting to elect the Speaker for the 8th Parliament was characterized by chaos, heated arguments, and the snatching of ballot papers. The situation escalated with the presence of the military in the chamber for the first time. Now, perhaps the epic moment was when the Tema West MP Carlos Ahinkra snatched the ballot papers whilst counting was ongoing. He was chased, beaten, and papers retrieved.
Of a process that has been mounted.
So some of his colleagues condemned his actions. Listen.
It goes without saying that we've had some embarrassing moments early this morning, which should ordinarily had not taken place. But I think in the end, consensus has been built. You would notice how, even when it came to the nomination of the first and second deputy speakers, leadership set the bar fresh, and the speaker is admonishing a lot more consensus building and lesson learning from this. I think it's in that spirit that we have to move forward and hopefully rebuild on some of the cracks that have been engineered in the last 6 hours or so.
What are some of the cracks and how are you going to deal with it?
Like I told you, and this unfolded live on national television and everybody saw it, there were embarrassing moments. Conduct unbecoming of members of parliament across both sides of the house. There are people kicking ballot boxes, in protest at what they thought wasn't going right. There are people snatching ballot papers. I'm not going to defend any of it. I'm not sure who's going to defend any of it. In the end, we all must quickly come to the realization that we have a democracy to rebuild. And these cracks that have shown up are things that we have to quickly reflect. How do such disagreements even get better resolved in the future so that we don't have this kind of spectacle? But how do we continue with the consensus building, which has started now, to ensure that we're able to deliver the kind of governance that the people of Ghana want? Democracy.
So that's MP for Afuase Ayabi, Kojo Oppong Nkrumah, speaking there to the incident that happened on the floor of Parliament, the very first sitting. The minority eventually boycotted the investiture. Meanwhile, the quest to attain majority status in Parliament saw the NPP MPs arriving in the chamber as early as 4 a.m. That's the NDC MPs to occupy the right-hand side of the Speaker. The minority today laughed at them. Here's Samuel George.
We've already occupied and elected a speaker. If I finish eating the soup and licking everything and finish the food and you come here licking the end of the plate, you are most miserable. We heard that they came here at 4 a.m. this morning. Let me tell you the backstory to that. Yesterday at 8:30 p.m., myself and my chief whip, Honorable Muntaka, had to come to Parliament to take care of a few things in the evening. As we arrived, the Job 600 lift, we met Atachia, Honorable Atachia, coming out of the lift. Then he said to us, what are you people coming to do here at this time? Then we said, but we have come for tomorrow's sitting. And he said, are you sure? Oh, this time again? As soon as he left, he picked the phone and called his people. And they came here at 4 a.m. and they've been sleeping in the chamber. Can you see how miserable they are? We knew we were going to come at 10 o'clock. You get it? But you see, they have come at 4 a.m. Would they be coming at 4 a.m. every day? Will they come to Parliament? But you see, it's good for the Ghanaian people. It then means that we're going to have punctuality in Parliament. But like I said, let's see after 1 week.
Samuel George there, MP for Ningo Prampram, speaking to us on that development. Well, later, we're staying in Parliament. Later, the President had to present the State of the Nation address, and these are highlights. Let's start with food production.
We are able to say that our country is now a net exporter of food, and we no longer have to import basic foods like plantain and tomato. The excellently executed policy for planting for food and jobs has laid the foundation for the agricultural transformation of our country. We are able to say that our country is now a net exporter of food, and we no longer have to import basic foods like plantain and tomato. Thanks to planting for food and jobs, food has been in abundance in our markets across the country.
So that's President Akufo-Addo on food security, food production. The State of the Nation address obviously afforded us the opportunity to learn a few more things, and major amongst them was the cost of the banking sector cleanup. Here's President Akufo-Addo on how much it cost us.
Probably the most difficult problem the government met on coming into office was the state of the banking and financial sector. Many of our banks were in distress and had been kept on unsustainable and artificial life support by the central bank. The supervisory agencies were unfortunately not performing their duties, and the governance and management structures of many of the banks were clearly not adequate. If truth be told, many of our finance houses were running what can only be called glorified Ponzi schemes, and had lured many depositors into these schemes. We were in a desperate situation, and urgent radical measures had to be taken to prevent the collapse of the entire financial and banking sector. The Bank of Ghana, under new leadership, intervened and has restored sanity to the sector. And in the process, we have saved the banks involved and 4.6 million depositors' funds. The government has had to find some 21 billion cedis to fund the cleaning up exercise. This exercise has enabled a more robust financial and banking services sector to emerge, the better to finance the rapid development of our nation.
21 billion Ghana cedis. That's how much it cost the country to clean up the banking sector. The president also seized the moment to talk about the peace of Dagbon.
Our first priority in fighting the pandemic has been and will continue to be the health and safety of our citizens. We pioneered life-saving innovations that the WHO has since sought to replicate elsewhere. A generation of young people have grown up knowing nothing else but Dagbon as a troubled land where there was no peace, and public officials hesitated to accept postings there. On assumption of office, we decided to tackle the problem with renewed vigor. Luckily for all of us, the three eminent chiefs who had been at the helm of the peace process since 2002 did not relent on their commitment or enthusiasm for the cause of peace. Our efforts bore fruit. A historic settlement was reached, and peace has been restored to Dagbon. I recall the joy and deep satisfaction that I felt on the day that I attended in Yendi the enskinment of the new dignified Yana, Muhammad Buhari II, and I carry my honorary title of Dagbon Malti Na Abudani.
That's President Akufo-Addo on the peace of Dagbon. Remember that we entered the year in a pandemic, and how government dealt with it was very important. President Akufo-Addo was quick to refer to the WHO's commendation of government's handling of the pandemic. Listen.
Our first priority in fighting the pandemic has been and will continue to be the health and safety of our citizens. We pioneered life-saving innovations that the WHO has since sought to replicate elsewhere. Our success thus far is a testament to the tireless work of our researchers, scientists, advisors, public health managers, frontline care workers, hospital staff, contact tracers, and so many others who have dedicated themselves to the fight to keep Ghanaians safe. Our nation is deeply indebted to them.
So that's by way of a recall of what happened in Parliament for the first part of this year. To help me do some analysis on this, host of the Super Morning Show, Kojo Yankson, joins me via Zoom. Hello, Kojo.
Hello, Ernest. It's good to be here.
Great to have you. We also have on the phone lines Samson Ladi Anyanini, private legal practitioner and host of Newsfile. Good evening, Samson. Hello, Samson. Can you hear us? Hello, Samson. Can you hear me? Well, we seem not to have the attention of Samson. We'll correct that. But let me start with you, Kojo. We entered the year quite surprised about the outcome of the parliamentary results, the parliamentary elections, where you had a very lean majority. Even at the time, we were not sure whether it was a hung parliament proper or there was a slight majority. And then we saw on the first day of sitting the chaos that was recorded on the floor of Parliament. Were you surprised that after that event, things seem not to have normalized since then?
I've got to say, Ernest, one of the interesting things that has shaped so much of how the year 2021 has evolved was the way Parliament began. Those numbers following the election, those close numbers and the drama of determining our majority and minority and choosing for the first time in the history of this country a speaker who did not belong to the party in executive government.
Indeed.
Those events had a ripple effect that we are now beginning to unpick. I'll give you an example. Mm-hmm. Not many people draw a link between the events of that first day of Parliament and fix the country. But if you take your time, you might see the link. You see, when the numbers were so close, it put in the minds of Ghanaians the idea that for the first time, we may have a parliament that can robustly check the executive. We felt we were going to see a strong minority play a role in government that they have never had the opportunity to play in the past, because they would, in essence, have so much influence and control in parliament that they could ensure that things don't get rubber stamped. There was a lot of hope riding on that, because you have to understand that was the choice of the electorate. People chose that. People went to the ballot and chose President Akufo-Addo, but rejected NPP MPs in many constituencies, so that we had this outcome. So they had an expectation. They had an expectation of Parliament. But as soon as the vetting began, people started to get disillusioned. I'm sure you remember how Hawa Kumsin sailed through her vetting, in spite of the fact that
having secured some more votes than the others whom we thought were going to do better than her.
Absolutely. She did far better than many others. And it seemed to the outsider, to the non-parliamentarian, that something had happened, that a certain expectation of kickback, which we had got from the signals that the minority themselves had been giving before, the outcome of the vetting, that expectation had somehow been thrown under the table, and that the minority was actually just as much under the control of the majority as they were when they had fewer numbers. I think that level of disillusion started to trickle onto social media. Little by little, people started making comments and linking things, connecting one thing to the other. People would complain about bad roads, and then they would throw their hands up in despair because just like it was in the past, you can't expect any action because Parliament is still weak. You can't expect your MP to get your road done because your MP is still under the thumb of the executive government. So little by little, that frustration started to manifest itself in a certain idea of, you know what, we might as well take things over ourselves. As people, we might as well step in and deal with issues. And that is the kernel that gave birth to Fix the Country.
And that's a very
So many
interesting
people
link
don't-
you draw there, Kojo, because as we learnt later, Kaka Macho of blessed memory himself was an NPP member, and yet he went on the tangent that he went with Fix the Country.
Absolutely. Another of the biggest events this year, of course, was the killing of Kaka and the subsequent
And we'll come to that in detail.
So we will get to that. We will get to that. But obviously, you make the point there. There was a certain disillusionment setting in among the people who realized that, look, it seems like it doesn't matter who we vote for. It doesn't matter who we vote for. The outcome is still the same. So we pick the same president as the last time. We thought, you know what, he deserves 8 years, to do something. But we thought we would change the dynamics in Parliament and see if that changes anything. But
Kojo,
nothing
kindly
changed.
hold the line for me there. Let me pick the thoughts of Samson. He's back with us on the line. Samson, thank you very much for joining us on this review program. Did you think that Ghanaians really expected Parliament to play out the way it did when they voted on December 7?
Well, Ernest, on the evening and the dawn getting into the morning of the swearing in of the president, a lot of things very clear that the party that had formed the government was not going to get things the way it desired. They clearly worked to have Professor Okwe, who, for all the period, except for a certain legacy he tried to create in ensuring that it would be private interest bail, was, like they say in peace, he was an errant boy of the executive. He was just there to do the bidding of the executive. And that's not what the parliament, in the structure of things, by the architecture of our constitution, is supposed to behave. Whether good or bad, once it is from the government, it is from executive, you endorse it and you find ways to bulldoze things through. Let the minority have say, let the majority have their way. And the parliament continued to be reduced to a mere rubber stamp, and that had no muscle whatsoever, and was not doing any checks that the Constitution had created to ensure that the checks existed, because Parliament is expected to play a critical role in the democracy, and that has been lost over the years. So I was one of those who was excited that things turned out the way they did. The embarrassment that the government wanted at all costs to push Michael Okwe back in there. We knew he was tired. This man had become so tired, he needed a walking stick to get into his vehicle. And I was asking myself, for what purpose again are they bringing it? Is it that they do not have anybody else to put up? The chairmen of both schools have been there for a long time. They know how parliament works. And they know how strong you need a parliament to be. You know, people like that, where were they? You couldn't put up any other candidate that could play. Then you remember how they tried in rationalization when pressures were put out, where they thought that things would be done their way. So they predetermined published posters, printed posters, so that on the occasion of the swearing in, it will be Michael Okwei who will be sitting in Parliament, and things completely 360. And it was Alban Bagbin, and how to now print a new brochure to put Alban Bagbin's name and pictures in there became a whole big issue.
I recall
but
that.
The politicians once again found a way to lie through their teeth, trying to rationalize. And I got really livid and angry at how politicians can try to want to think that all of us are dummies and that we can't see what was going on. So I was happy about the turn of events, and I felt that for once we were getting a parliament that will give us what it meant ought to be.
But Samson, has that expectation been met? And you make the point about the introduction of the private members bill by Professor Michael Okwei in the previous parliament, and that has, as we know now, has been leveraged quite strongly by the minority. We've seen bills from Francis Xavier Susu, from Roxy Nelson Defiametbo, Sam George, and quite recently Dominic Ayene as well. But we've not seen the full manifestation of those bills. Is that not an expectation cut short? Still, you know, we're seeing the effect of the minus or plus one playing in there.
Right. As far as the private members bill initiative is concerned, Professor Okwei did a good job with that, and this speaker is also continuing. They have, for the first time, created a department, and they have put one of the best when it comes to putting the bills together, drafting things, and making sure that they look good. They have gotten one of such a person, and they are beginning to give support to the MPs to be able to fashion out, you know, the ideas they want to promote as bills, laws. But they need to better strengthen that department. They need a lot more funding to get that department more functional. Again, to have only, it does appear it is only minority members of the House, that's the NDC, that have become interested in seeking to use that tool to bridge the gap and to resolve issues that need resolution. That, for me, is one of the best. The majority MPs must begin to sit up and not simply act as food, simply act as people who are there to endorse government policy, good or bad. It speaks so bad about them that things are happening in the country, and MPs have opportunity to contribute to improve, to contribute to change things, to make history, and the majority MPs are sitting, folding their arms, and watching only the minority in the majority to, you know, sponsor these bills. It's good at all. But once my expectations have not been met within the year, largely because of the manner that things have turned out in the past, I have faith and I believe that if nothing at all, the kind of person we have as speaker and the years, decades of experience, you know, is for him, and knowing that he stands at a point in time that he can make history, I have faith that going forward, he will ensure that the right things are being done, and beginning to also see that the MPs are realizing that all the jokes they played in the House, we have watched, and the citizens are not excited one bit. And so they will begin to set up and live up to expectations.
Very well. Kojo, let me ask you, do you have faith like Samson? Parliament ended quite controversially as it started, and we know the issue of e-levy is still hanging. Do you have faith that once they resume next year, some of these things will be dealt with more, you know, professionally and in a manner that is less acrimonious?
Ernest, I do have faith that Parliament will sort itself out. I don't think it will be immediate, though. I think it's a process. At the end of the process, we'll have a better Parliament. But we'll probably go through a lot more of this before we get there. Let's not forget that Parliament itself has been the instrument of its own downfall throughout the years. Parliament itself has deliberately weakened itself to favor the executive throughout the years, simply because the party in the executive is always the party in majority in Parliament. But for the first time under Alban Bagbin, there was hope that the power dynamics would change. And Alban Bagbin himself, as you can see throughout the year, he has attempted to, just by sheer force of his personality, to move Parliament into a stronger position. He has sort of tried to strongman his way to a stronger Parliament. Look at the way he dealt with this whole Francis Xavier Sosu incident. Attempting to subsume the power of the police under the authority of Parliament. On many occasions, suggesting that the police cannot take action unless he determines that the individual they are interested in was not engaged in parliamentary activity. You've seen how he handled the Ghana School of Law issue, where he issued a directive to the School of Law, when actually there are systems and methods by which such changes can be made. But he sought to present in the eyes of Ghanaians a parliament that is strong enough to make things happen on its own speed. And it is well-intentioned. In fact, it is right for our parliament to be strong. But you can see that Mr. Bagbin wants to do this just by sheer force of will, rather than going through the motions of changing things little by little, which is what, unfortunately, we need. You would have heard people say that all of this fighting, the blows that were thrown in Parliament at the beginning of the year, and then the fisticuffs we saw a couple of weeks ago, that all of these things are necessary to grow our democracy. Well, I disagree slightly. Yes, it is important for us to disagree and find a way to work through our disagreements. It is important for us to have precedents, which we would then make decisions on, which would then help Parliament to run smoothly in the future. But I don't think slapping each other is necessary for our democracy to grow. I mean, I don't know how many steps forward we leaped when the deputy minister received several slaps in quick succession a couple of weeks ago.
Well,
I don't know
let's see how that
our parliament advanced.
Let's see how that will pan out in 2022. Hopefully, some of these things will be implemented, and Parliament will not have to record some of these chaos that we witnessed this year. This is the Joy 2021 Year in Review. And your views and comments are welcome via WhatsApp console. It's 055-1111-997. On Zoom is Koji Yankson, host of the Super Morning Show, and Samson Ladi Anyanini, private legal practitioner and host of Newsfile, helping me do some analysis. From Parliament, let's go to the courts now. We started the year with an election petition. John Mahama had lost the 2020 election, but sought to challenge it in court. Now, here's lead counsel for John Mahama, Chachu Chikata.
What I'm respectfully submitting is that your lordships have recognized that the supplementary statement of case, or the supplement to the statement of case, as we have referred to it, where it can assist the court to address the matters that are an issue before it, may be entertained. Where the supplementary statement of case can assist the court in addressing the matters before it, it may be entertained. Now, I would like to refer also to a decision which I do not yet have a certified true copy of, but a decision made on Tuesday by your lordships in the case Republic versus the High Court, parte Attorney General, which also happened to be filed by us. That application was indeed to add grounds of review and to file a supplement, and that supplement was to address not only the additional ground of review, but that supplement was even to address a ruling of the court in respect of bias, which we had applied for and we were still waiting to receive. That supplement was to address even that. And we were not allowed on the simple basis that the rules regarding review did not provide or did not allow for...
Mr. Chikata, if I recall, that supplement was also to allow you to fill in holes that you had left in your submissions. So, if we can get back to today's business, please.
We did not... It was not meant to fill in holes, and that may be your Lordship's interpretation.
The holes were numbered Q, N, and 0. I was and O. I was actually part of that panel. Thank you.
The whole, your ladyship, the grounds were numbered Q, R, S, T. I'm not sure I know what the Q, N, and O that you're referring to. My fundamental submission is that this court, in the exercise of its discretion in hearing a review, is able to consider an application for a supplement to the statement of case.
So that is lead counsel for John Mahama, Chachu Chikata, arguing at the Supreme Court. And I think you had the Justice Gertrude Tokono at some point interject. And there was a huge controversy about the questions, the 12 questions that Chachu Chikata wanted the chairperson of the EC to answer. Now, at some point, the legal team of the NDC described the 7-member panel as unfair and unbalanced. But the president's legal team defended the selection. Listen to Kojo Ponkuma.
Often in matters like this, you have the most senior judges of
NDC is on a path to smear and undermine the integrity of the Supreme Court and the justices of the Supreme Court. NDC is on a path to smear and undermine the integrity of the Supreme Court and the justices of the Supreme Court. And they are doing that because they are clear in their mind that this petition before the courts is a ruse. And I explain to you. The first evidence you notice is Muntaka Muhammad Mubarak, who goes on national television and alleges, without more, just a mere allegation, that a Supreme Court judge has been involved in calling one NDC member of parliament elect, trying to convince SAME to vote for Speaker Michael Quaid during the election of Speaker. The real object of that allegation is to begin to poison the wells ahead of this litigation. If the Chief Justice sits on a panel or does not sit on a panel, a justice may or may not be delivered. That when you have a panel of 7 or a panel of 9, it can affect whether or not justice will be delivered. And that when you have an older or a younger bench, it can affect how justice may or may not be delivered. It is one of the most bogus analysis that I have ever heard when it comes to jurisprudence.
So, Kojo Ponkuma there, he spoke for the legal team of President Akufo-Addo. I want to start with you, Samson, on this one. It was quite a long one for us, relatively short compared to the 2012 election petition. What would, for you, be the impact of this election petition on our legal system?
Well, talking about the courts, don't forget that we have, I think, over a dozen parliamentary seats that are being contested, and I think one of the, perhaps the bad sides that we may see about the parliament going forward as in accepting our faith in they returning and conducting themselves a lot more better, will be the outcome of these legal challenges. So that if the outcomes may change the character of the parliament for good or for bad. If the cases were determined expeditiously and the NPP wins enough to shift the numbers in their favor, they may be encouraged to go about things without building consensus, as Chairman Sibonsu clearly appears to be leading his side, and to abysmal results that we have seen over the period. The old order they have been used to will become the order of the day again, where they just go on with everything without any opposition. They ignore the opposition. They won't listen to anything and move on. But again, if most of those parliamentary outcomes favor the NDC, then we also may be likely to see a parliament that will unnecessarily work to seek to defeat government business when they don't have to do so. So we are praying that if these things happen, they will all be minded that building a country must be the foremost thing on their mind, and not their parochial partisan interest or election victory interest. Now,
to the presidential petition.
I have said from day one that the NDC had issues in the manner in which they approach the court. Well, the court appeared to have been ready to receive a petition that was in the fashion of, if you like, the usual way, like what happened in 2012. Unfortunately, the NDC went to court on a different tangent and didn't intend to proceed in the manner that when the NPP went to court, they did, where they had to marshal pink sheets, and in their pleadings, the way they put the document in the court, they did the mathematical numbers, polling stations, that codes with our serial numbers, sheets that are unsigned, that are signatures and the rest of them, and they tabulated, and all the judges agreed on a number of the issues in favor of the FPP then. But some of them that disagreed, and majority disagreed on the track of the petition, being that the cumulative effect would not affect the overall result as were declared, in the sense that the votes that were being challenged, the manner in which, the transparent manner in which everybody else was involved in, polling agents were involved in, and all of that, you cannot punish the voter for the sins of the polling station officer or an agent who has done a bad job. Now, when they went to court this time in the NDC, they took a different mode. So the court's expectation appears to have been that the suit should have been cut in the mode of what had happened in 2012. And when they didn't find it that way, it does appear to be, from the very start, that they saw a challenge. You are not throwing up the figures, and you are not challenging specific figures. You only have issues with declarations and the manner in which they have been done. And election petitions over the world are detected on the question of what the numbers you intend you contest will do to the overall impact or the result. And they didn't get that. And they started, for me, which was very poor, even though most of us lawyers encounter some of these things certain times. But a serious matter like this, and the time for which they had to get ready, prepare, and file the suit, it was unpardonable that they made the mistakes that they made, that they had to go to the court and make corrections. Corrections which, if they were not careful, could have been denied. But I have said that those corrections were corrections that would be allowed on any occasion. So on that score, I find that they didn't seem that ready. Now, in the court process, to put their entire, suit and the success of it on whether or not Jean Mensah, the electoral commission chairperson, was going to testify was also another bad way to approach it. So I think they have themselves to blame largely for the outcome, that they have successfully, played the minds of the public, those who perhaps have not been too educated around the law, to say that, oh, this is a person who is running away from accountability, and that this is the place where she was supposed to account and she didn't make herself available. And, the public bought into that. Even journalists bought into that. But from where I sit, and a clear analysis of the process, that doesn't come into the equation at all. That would only be an issue that you would play up in the public gallery and get sympathy for it, not in the courtroom.
Interesting.
And so, largely, they have themselves to blame for the way the suit turned out in the Supreme Court. And I think that from the way things were, the judges had no hesitation. They had no hesitation, legitimately, to throw them out. In fact, I had an expectation that the preliminary legal objection that the NPP took against the suit would have been upheld, and then the suit would have, died without seeing all that went on. So that the very first few days, the preliminary legal objection, if it had been taken and found to have been worthy, the suit would have gone.
And that would have been literally a technical knockout, and the suit would not have been heard. But let me come to you, Kojo. You and I, we are not learned people like Samson. The events that characterized that preceded the filing of the petition, where you had supporters pouring out to the streets, being led by party members, some MPs. At some point, we had the MPs involved in a standoff with the police, some arrests being made. What do you make of the handling of that and government reaction to that? Hello, Kojo? Kojo, you have to unmute your device. Well, we seem to have a connection to Kojo's line there. Samson, let me put that to you. The handling of the events that preceded the filing of the petition.
Well, again, I said earlier, and then these were happy about it, what I said. What you heard, for example, McMenu suggests that even the NDP got votes, that it didn't end. Then the NDP comes up and says, yeah, that's good, we're going to do it. Then when you say you have done something that's bad, they come at you, the hot, and some very good friends of mine who are there and who testify, certainly they cannot be friends anymore. But of course, that's part of our job that we do. Leading to the process, and particularly getting to the point where they had this, was it an accountant or some article guy, who found the number, and it was on social media and showing us the tickets. And even before that, look, Dr. Petahwa told us clearly where a certain huge figure, was something that could not be entertained. Then they show up in court, and you don't find that on their paper. and they want the defense to step in, and then they use cross-examination to do what? And to be frank with you, I looked at that compared with communication to the public, and I could tell how they were deceiving the public all along. Because look, your pleading be good, and if you set strong points that both are stolen, that there were places that, certain speakers, they talked about shanty reading, some huge numbers that they spoke about, and you don't find them in your document, come on. You can only deceive the public who are gullible, the section of the public that is gullible and that knows the law, that you would need the minister to come in before you will not bring these things up. Because it will not work. You can't only raise those matters in cross-examination and expect that will become thrust of your suit. So the process is leading to it, and they get hope. They did these permutations, and throughout the public, when you watch the way they did it, you were more likely to believe than not believe them. And then eventually they filed the suit, and the suit was fully on a technical, legal basis. It doesn't context numbers. Clearly speaking, that was disappointing.
Kojo is back with us this time on the phone. Kojo, do you think that John Mahama conceding defeat in that petition helped matters security-wise?
Well, it did, and that was sort of in keeping with what we expect statesmen to do. Unfortunately, it was short-lived because as recently as October 2021, 15th of October, on a Friday in Cape Coast, during his thank you tour, John Mahama said, and I quote, "You could see that the court had predetermined the decision it was going to take on the matter." And he was referring to the election petition. That I thought was unfortunate. That is not statesmanlike to suggest that the Supreme Court had a prejudiced, judgment against him after accepting the ruling. So it all feeds into a lot of the politics that were surrounding this election petition. It wasn't a three-dimensional court case. It was a political move which had to play out at that stage in court, in the Supreme Court. But it was a political move. Ernest, you will remember that before the petition was filed, and you remember how long it took for the petition to be filed. It was filed at the very last minute.
Indeed.
But before it was filed, the narrative that the NDC was putting out there through their general secretary, what do parties have again? Chairman?
Yeah, the chairman of the party?
Through the chairman of the party. And many of the executives, as well as Sami Jemfi, the narrative they were putting out there was that the NDC won, but the EC declared for the NPP. That the NDC won, that the election was stolen. The term stolen verdict was being bandied about. But when the petition was filed, the case that President Mahama, the petitioner, put forward was that nobody won. Not that the NDC won, and that the NPP was given the victory unconstitutionally, but that nobody won. Now, you hear that and you think to yourself that, okay, maybe they've actually looked at the numbers and realized that it's not that they won, it's just that there wasn't enough for anyone to be declared a winner. But either way, they've looked at the numbers and revised their position. But then they went to court and they had no numbers. So throughout the proceedings, we never saw the NDC's evidence for their case in terms of electoral data. We never saw it, beginning to end. So it started to look as if the whole point of that election petition was to play the Chachuchi Kata card. Now, Chachuchi Kata is a very talented lawyer. In fact, it is easy to imagine Chachuchi Kata winning any case on cross-examination. That's how good he is. So it would appear
that the whole plan, the whole time, was to get Chachu Chikata to cross-examine G. Mensah. The petitioner was convinced that something had gone wrong.
You win
the
a case.
petitioner was quite clear in his mind that the Electoral Commission had made a mistake. So all they wanted to do was to get that admitted in court. And no one can get that done better than Chachu Chikata in the mind of the petitioner.
And we saw that hard as he tried, the judges were quite resolute on what they wanted to do and on the procedures.
In the end, it was not the judges. The respondents played chess. They simply decided not to make the move, not to put the witness on the stand. As for the Supreme Court, they simply had to determine whether that was procedurally correct or not. And they determined that it was correct.
Well, if you're listening to us, Kojo, we want to hear from our listeners as well. If you are listening to us, your views and comments are welcomed on the WhatsApp console 055-1111-997. Maybe later, towards the end of the program, we'll open the phone lines for you to call and join in. But I just want us to move quickly to the other event this year, which is the COVID-19 and how government handled it. There was the controversy about the procurement of the Sputnik V vaccine. But first, let's start with this. The procurement of nose masks for students and concerns raised by some MPs, including former MP Inusa Fuseni and all of that. Let's listen to those sounds.
Why did you decide not to wear it to school? No reason? Yes.
I don't know. Why? Why not told to come with a nose mask when you are coming to school? My own has spoiled. Your own has spoiled.
I think 3 children sit on a dual deck, and some of them don't even have sitting places. So to practice social distance here in our school, I don't think it's going to be possible. Unless otherwise, something is done immediately about that. So we need more chairs for the children. Because as now they are sitting 3, and some don't even have seats to sit. So to practice social distance means that one should sit per one dual deck, and that is even going to be another problem. I came here some 4 years ago, and I think that is the situation since. We have been managing with the old furniture we have.
We also expect that in agreeing on the times, teachers and the students will be conscious of how these children can go back home in safety. And then, of course, it's also important for us to note that under the circumstances in which we find ourselves, we close early so that children can get home as early as possible. And you see, also because of COVID-19, the student needs some amount of rest.
So these are sounds from the very early part of this year when the government procured some face masks for students and put in place the protocols and expected schools to observe all of that. But later, we knew about the controversy that characterized the procurement of the vaccine. And this came up led by the ranking member on the Health Committee of Parliament, Kwabena Minta Kando.
So I do not want to jump the gun. Not until we present our reports, we have not finished our work. So anything at all can happen. Any recommendation will be found in the report. And when it is laid, I know you have copies of the report.
I want to start with you, Samson, on this. The report eventually came, the report on the probe, the parliamentary probe into the vaccine. Disappointed in what we eventually saw in that report?
Well, the events leading to that investigation left us in no doubt that the minister clearly was not the one who was in the thick of affairs as far as the procurement processes in these things were concerned, except that he's a sector minister, so he has to take the fall. Unfortunately, that also clearly is the reason he became almost irremovable and could not be disciplined. So let's not kid ourselves. The reason the president couldn't discipline, despite the clear, report by a bipartisan committee of the NPP indicting him every step of the way, breaching our constitution, breaching our procurement laws. Every imaginable law he was supposed to follow, he breached it. And he himself, says, I'm sorry, I didn't know about this, I didn't know about that. The reason the president couldn't discipline him, and he became almost irremovable, untouchable, is because the fact remains he was not the man at the ethic of affairs, except that it's a ministry, and things later has to be foisted some salt on him. And he has to, help to save face for things that are clearly decisions that were made. So my biggest point is in the fact that we have given such a bad, impression out there that you are within the gap. You can break all the laws. You can break even the Constitution and still have a job. If it's an opposition person who has done something small, that person will be pursued. They will be slapped with causing financial loss. They will be harassed. That tells you that the democracy is still not giving precedence that it's supposed to. And that's the reason some of us think that the country's style of development, mass movement, may generate into bigger ones that government will not have comfort. Parliament may not have any comfort zone to open. The things will be forced from the ordinary, and you must play according to the state, or you can't govern. Things will happen that way if the guys in charge, continue to want to take everybody for granted.
And Kojo, what do you make of the minority's position on this, and especially when it came to the probe? Aside from Kwabena Mintah-Kandor, we also saw Muntaka Mubarak and how he conducted himself on that committee. What is your take on that?
This was a strong moment for Parliament. Unfortunately, in the end, the sum effect of all of their effort was zero. But you saw a lot of effort at the committee level of individual Parliament members seeking the truth. They asked the tough questions. Alhaji Muntaka Mubarak stood out as a person who understands procedure, but is also a lateral thinker who can ask important questions and seek information for the knowledge of the whole nation. They really shone in that moment, and they deserve commendation for that. But unfortunately, this thing was a mess from the beginning. You see, as a nation, we've gone through the pains of writing laws, very beautifully written laws. People travel from their countries to come and learn how we write our laws. But our implementation is so impoverished. Look at the Public Procurement Act and how it clearly spells out what to do if there is a need for emergency procurement. It's all spelled out. Whether the thing has to go through cabinet, parliament, there are procedures to do it on an emergency basis. And these procedures are there for a reason. Because all it takes is one bad person to come along and say, we have an emergency, and use that as an excuse to break all our laws to his benefit and the benefit of others, and to the detriment of the nation. All it takes is one. So to protect us from that, we have written all these laws. The health minister admits to breaking these laws. It's not like he's being accused and he's denying them. He admits that he circumvented them. His excuse is that we were not in ordinary times. And the president looks on. In fact, he jokes about it. The president went to pass jokes about how the health minister is facing the wrath of the people. Yeah, Bonazum, left and right. He was making jokes about it. But the man had admitted to breaking the law.
But this was in his backyard. This was in the home of the minister. You expected him to take chances politically?
I expected him to be presidential. So if you can't, if you don't think you can take the right moral position on something, how about keeping your mouth shut? Is that not an option? Is that not even the more prudent option? How do they describe silence? Don't they say it's golden? Why do you go and make a joke about it? When the man has admitted breaking the law. But you see, you have to think about certain things. There is some nuance to this. Maybe the president didn't have a choice in his mind. Because those payments that were made to the company that had been illegally contracted to supply us with vaccines, those payments were authorized by the Finance Ministry and the Bank of Ghana. So really, if we are going to hold people accountable for doing the wrong thing, we would have to hold the Finance Ministry accountable too.
And we saw evidence of that, evidence of the transaction from the Finance Ministry to the Bank of Ghana and all of that.
Absolutely. So we would then have to hold everybody to account. Then we'll be opening up a can of worms. Maybe that is the real reason why the president found himself impotent to act when it came to the finance minister. Or maybe, when it came to the health minister. Or maybe it goes even further back. Maybe the president lost the moral right to condemn anybody for their behavior when it comes to COVID because of how he and other members of government behaved earlier in the year when they attended Sir John's funeral and it turned into a super spreader event. Maybe that was when he lost the moral right to point the finger at anybody for doing the wrong thing for COVID. Because otherwise, it baffles me that the president who calls for accountability, who encourages the Attorney General to prosecute people who do the wrong thing, would have somebody, a member of his own cabinet, admit to breaking the law. And all he does is approve the guy to go on leave.
Could you, Ernest?
Yeah, Samson, you can carry on
yes,
that.
and so that we don't forget that this minister actually committed perjury. He told a lie
before Parliament.
And that too, there's no consequence for it. Come on. I sit on Newsfire just moderating a program. And when I was not wearing mask, even there were times when I used the face shield, or what is it?
Yes, the face shield, yeah.
Yes, and they came at me that is not protective. And we're giving a bad example to the public. We need you guys who are doing important shows like Newsfile to continue to wear the mask and to encourage people to do so. And yet, what did they do? The politicians themselves, what did they do?
We saw them, the executive lawbreakers. This is the 2021 year in review here on Joy 99.7 FM. Samson Ladia Yanini and Kojo Yankson, host of the Super Morning Show, helping me to do the analysis on some of the major stories we brought to you this year. And gentlemen, I want us to move away from the executive, from Parliament and from the courts to talk about education. There was a matter, even though education took us back to the court. It was about the enrollment of 2 Rastafarian students to Achimota School. Here are some of the sounds we brought to you during the coverage of those stories.
I directed the school to admit the 2 students, the 2 Rastafarians, if I may put it that way. Yeah.
Why?
Well, we heard that they've been denied of admission, and we thought that that wasn't the right decision by the school. Our mandate as Ghana Education Service is to provide quality education to every Ghanaian child, irrespective of its political, religion, and ethnicity, and what have you. So if the school has to engage the parents, it's not the first time we are having a parents in the school. It's all about internal communication. It's all about engaging the parents and advising the students and helping them wash their hair, bleach them, keep the hair neat. Once they focus on their studies and it doesn't affect anything in council, we feel that the school has to admit them. This is not the first time. We've had Rastafarians, some of them in some of the senior high, they have completed. Currently, we have 1 or 2 in some of our senior high schools, and we don't have any issues with them.
Now, if Achimota School has a rule like this, then it's possible that people in the past have been denied admission and we were not aware as a country. Does the GES intend to take any action against the school?
No, well, that hasn't come to our attention anyway. So if they have turned off some people in the past, we didn't hear of that. And what has come to our attention is what we have told them to.
So that is Cassandra Chumampo, for the Public Relations Officer for the Ghana Education Service, in that interview with my colleague Daniel Dazi. Well, the NAGRAT, that's the National Association of Graduate Teachers, also reacted to this. Let's hear from President Angel Kabonu.
We are calling on the Ghana Education Service to redirect the headmistress and the staff of Achimota Senior High School to ensure that the rules and regulation of Achimota Senior High School, and indeed any other senior school, is abided by every student. The school is not a fashion environment. The school is not an environment to exhibit one's religious beliefs. The school is an environment for training, and conformity is part of training. And we expect every student to abide by the rules of the school. NAGRAT welcomes anyone who will want to go to court on this issue and on issue of discipline in our schools. But that when that court issue comes up, NAGRAT will attach itself because we are an interested party. That court case will not be limited into the wearing of rasta. It will be expanded into the establishment of rules and regulation of our schools. If the courts decide that everybody can do whatever he or she likes, you will all be our guests as teachers. We will also develop ways and means of ensuring that we have proper chaotic school environment.
That is Angel Kabonu, president of NAGRAT. Kojo, this was huge. I want to start with you on this. This was very huge, very controversial. We spent weeks talking about it. I know your position on this. You thought this was much ado about nothing. But let's start with the coherence or lack of it on the part of the Ghana Education Service when this started, on the policy of the dressing of students in schools.
Yeah, it's funny. The whole debate on this thing was a little bit upside down. The loudest voices on the matter were the people who had the least locus on the issue, and that's the teachers. And the quietest voices on the matter were the people whose direction was most needed, and that was the Ghana Education Service. You see, if they had taken this as a systemic issue and issued a set of directives by which all schools must conform, rather than making it a sort of individualistic case-by-case, let us engage Achimota and see what they think type of situation, we wouldn't have had this discussion. It would have been a simple matter of issuing a directive. From now on, hair is not part of uniform. Or from now on, hair must meet a uniform standard. If they had issued a simple directive one way or the other, it would have ended the matter. But they didn't, and I don't know why. I don't understand what kind of politics were at play here. I don't really understand how one school, Achimota, held so much sway that the Ghana Education Service lost its way in a matter that was directly under their purview. As for the teachers, and Angel Kabonu in particular, who, by the way, I know personally, I think is a great gentleman. But for the first time, I found myself disagreeing with every single thing he had to say on this matter. I mean, that voice you just played, where he said the school is a place for training and conformity is a part of training. Look, let's remind ourselves of something. There are places where conformity is a part of the training, like in the military or in the security services. There is a need for an individual who is being subsumed into the military, for example, to be trained to lose his or her individuality and only see him or herself as part of a unit. For that person to put aside his or her own individuality and personality and consider him or herself a weapon deployed for the defense of a nation. There is a need for that sort of mental brainwashing to happen. So they train out your personality. That's why you wear uniform. That's why you have a haircut. That's why you don't have facial hair. That's why all the things you might have chosen to do on your own, you are banned from doing when you are in the military or in any of the security services. But when you send your child to school, are you sending them there to be brainwashed, to lose their individuality, for them to no longer be a person? Are you sending them there to become soldiers? So why was Angel Carboni talking about conformity being a part of training in a school? And you see, the thing that interested me the most was that he really thought that somehow if you allow someone to wear their hair a certain way, it is unlocking the key to chaos. That if one person does it, then others will do it. And then somehow teachers will find it difficult to teach. If you are given a classroom full of people in loincloth and you are a teacher, you teach them. That is all. If you can't do that, then you can't be a teacher. You can't come and complain that because of somebody's hair, you are unable to carry out your duty as a teacher. Therefore, if people are allowed to come in with any kind of hair, you will also contribute to chaos. That's what Angel Carboni said.
For him, but Kojo, for him, standardization was also very important. And you hear him talk about a holistic training of the child and not just with learning. And that was very important for him.
That means we have not developed beyond 1950 in this country. If that is really what his view is, that in order to train a child, that child must lose his or her individuality, then we are still in 1950. By the way, in fact, we are probably before 1950 because in the 50s, in America, they were sending people to the moon. We still struggle to send people to the United Kingdom.
Could you hold it there for me? Let me ask something about this from the legal angle. This was in court. I remember Ras Wayo was full of praise for the judge who sat on this case. If my memory serves me right, the state intended to challenge this again in court. But do you think the ruling on this settles it, Samson?
You started with Kojo saying you knew his position. How about me?
I'm not sure. I don't quite recall.
All right. So I moderated a number of shows on it. And I came out and people said they knew my view. Sadly, I don't have a view on this. Except that I find that in this country, a few times we project a lot of illogic and waste time on things that are really not necessary. It's the reason we will spend weeks arguing, and we have issues that Muslim girls have to wear their hijab to school, and we don't have any problems that nuns will dress the way they dress. And we can't accept a Muslim woman wear a hijab to work. And some places we discriminate against that. And once you say, project the argument the way Kojo just did, then people say, how about the traditionalist guy? He will also say that by his own tradition, he doesn't have to bath. He will not take a shower for months. And so he should also be allowed to be in the school, or he will come to school naked. And that should be allowed. And we project a whole host of illogic. And we say if you allow this, that's the floodgates you are opening. I can't imagine that we spend our energies and time, doing all of this to ourselves. So, could you... That's how I disappoint you.
But that's not all that happened on the education front, and I think
there's an appeal. There's an appeal, though. There's an appeal that is pending.
Okay. So we'll follow that and see how that pans out. But that was not all on the education front. We remember the issue of fasting in Wesley Girls High School. Let's bring back the sound of the spokesperson of the Chief Imam, Sheikh Aremeyaw Shaibu, who spoke on this on Newsnight earlier this year.
Really, we must all get to address this thing so that when we can address it once and for all, it will be helpful because it has security implications. The anger is something that terrorists can exploit. I have no doubt in that. Let us not provide the soft spot for terrorists to say that Muslims are mistreated in Ghana and so therefore they can recruit. I tell the Minister of National Security, it's a matter for national security and they must get involved.
I know the Peace Council was involved in this, and we spoke to the Chief Whip, the Minority Chief Whip, Muntaka Mubarak, who was pushing for a final resolution on this matter. I'm not sure if this was quite settled. Could you, do you recall?
I don't recall any further development on that story. But I do remember the sentiments around the time that it first happened. Both of my sisters went to Wesley Girls, so you can well imagine that in my house this came up for very thorough debate.
I can imagine.
Yeah. Look, I think the school had been lulled into a sense of self-entitlement over years of being allowed to make such decisions about their students without anybody questioning them. But in reality, these are very deep matters that cannot be left to the headmistress of a school to decide. No, I don't really think that even though I pay school fees and leave my child in your care for several months at a time, I would want you to determine whether or not my child can freely practice the tenets of her religion. I really don't think that it should be left to a headmistress or any head of an institution of education, study, to determine the religious and spiritual growth of a child. But we do it, we allow it. So, kids go to Catholic schools and they are forced to go to Catholic mass. Or, they go to the Methodist school and they are forced to go to Methodist church service, even though they are Muslim. We've done this for such a long time that then became our argument for normalizing what happened in Wesley Girls, which on any day should not have been right. But in the end, the child and her parents agreed to go along with what the school said. And to me, that ends the matter, because in the end, religion is a personal and individual thing. They say we should work out our own salvation with fear and trembling. So I suppose they worked it out with their school. I don't know who feared and who trembled, but we didn't hear much more after that.
Indeed, we didn't hear much more after that. And let's move to another issue. This one, I know Samson's view on it, to ban or not to ban. And we had, quite some time discussing Operation Halt. The task force set fire on excavators and bulldozers belonging to an NPP's woman, the women's organizer of the NPP, Kate Jimfua, the constituency chairman of the opposition NDC in Etua West, one of the hotspots for Galamsey activities, shut down this approach by government in fighting illegal mining. Listen.
Some of us felt that the approach was wrong, because you cannot use the military and the police to guide the mining site throughout the day, throughout the week, throughout the year. And for that matter, there should have been a concerted effort by having a consultative assembly or meeting where the public would dialogue with the state officials. There's no Galamsey in Accra. There's no Galamsey going on in the Kumasi metropolis. You get it in the outskirts of some of the districts within the Ashanti region, but not the Kumasi metropolis. But when you come to the communities where the mining is done, that is where the engagement must start.
The National Association of Small-Scale Miners also took on the military for allegedly burning the excavators and equipment belonging to some of their members. In fact, they threatened a court action.
Yes, we want clarification on the president's directives to the military. That is, did the president order the military to burn excavators on site or seize them? This is a question that we need answers to be answered. For example, the military were asked to go on river bodies, but we have a situation whereby they veer off and they went to communities whereby there are licensed small-scale miners and they went burning their equipment. The other one that we want clarification, or we want to find out or see how best, can't the government liaise with the Minerals Commission for the names of small-scale block out areas across the country and share with the deployed military personnel to prevent them from harassing legally licensed miners?
So what was the minister's position on this? Here's Abu Jinapo.
The resolve of President Akufo-Addo is total and unflinching, and we cannot afford to waver at any stage of the ongoing crusade. Distinguished guests, humbly, I will want to submit strongly my view on the ongoing debate on the decommissioning and demobilization of excavators used for mining. When a country is confronted with extraordinary problems, extraordinary measures ought to be deployed. The use of excavators for mining on our river bodies is an extraordinary problem, which requires extraordinary measures to deal with it.
Samson, let me start with you on this one, and we're wrapping up in the next 5 minutes. Unfortunately, we couldn't touch on some of the other stories, but this was quite key for you.
Yeah, my biggest disappointment with Abu Jinapor, who is doing a very good job, a good friend of mine, but I'm not too sure he thinks of me the same way after my criticism of these matters. Yes, extraordinary situations may require extraordinary approaches. There's an extraordinary situation in Parliament. What do you think we should do? We should march in there with the army, drive them out, and then reconstitute, take some people to become MPs and start working? No. When you are in a constitutional republic, it's the law you use. What does the law say about how to demobilize excavators? The monies that the Minerals Commission have been collecting, including for the purposes of attaching monitors to excavators to know each excavator that moves and goes into a mining field, and how to set charge for all of these things and hold the owners responsible. What is happening to those monies? Okay, so to think that you've done something, the president supports you, and therefore you have the law supporting you, is unheard of. And I say today that is the most egregious, illegal, unconstitutional conduct that this government has condoned and allowed itself to get into in the name of using extraordinary measures to deal with extraordinary situations. They'll say, oh, who has come to complain? When the state is against you, it's not that simple. Other people who are in this thing, who have approached me to say, we want to sue. And I tell them, I can't represent you. For very good reason. I want to keep to myself. You know, not that they don't have a case. They have a solid case. But when the state is against you and it matches its, whole, power against you, it can be very disturbing. So it was illegal. It will remain illegal. It will remain a block on that minister's, work and this president's, regime for that approach.
Even if the end justifies the means. Exactly. So one of the things I think we should be doing next year is to track, the progress of Operation Halt, how it's fared so far.
That's so.
Yeah. And Kojo, we're running out of time on this. I just wanted to touch on this very final one quickly in just 2 minutes. We had our own fight as journalists, and there was one we picked up from Adabraka, where my good friend Caleb Kuda was assaulted by national security operatives. The National Security Ministry's response to this for you was what? How do you describe it?
Well, they passed the buck. Maybe that was just a smart move, because honestly, by handing over the culprits to their origin institutions, they divorced themselves from responsibility for what happened to Caleb Kuda. In essence, they left it to the military, the police, wherever these people came from, those institutions, to deal with them on an issue, an event that they didn't carry out while they were under the direct supervision of those institutions. So as you can see, different things happened. The person who was named at the center of it, the one who actually orchestrated the beating of Caleb Kuda, ended up being in some way promoted to become the commander of 64 Battalion. We are still waiting for this action, so-called action that is to be taken against him. All it tells you is that all of these institutions well, let me put it this way, none of these institutions openly is against what happened to Caleb Kuda, which means it will happen again. I wonder who it will be next. Maybe you, maybe me.
We hope it doesn't
We
recur.
can't rely on any state institution to actually take action if any of us are assaulted at the hands of those who are supposed to protect us.
We hope it doesn't recur. Kojo, I want to thank you for your time. And Samson, thank you so much for joining us on this review. There were many other stories we could not touch on. There were other stories that came through, but unfortunately, we don't have time to go through all of that. The year ended for us here at Multimedia, especially for those of us with Joy, on a very sad note, losing our boss, the general manager, Elvis Kwashi. And we say that may his soul rest in peace. I am absolutely grateful to God for him. He's been instrumental in me coming this far. That's it for our show tonight. Many thanks for your company. I'm Ernest Minu. Enjoy the rest of our programs and a happy new year.